All right, hello everyone, and we're going to be doing a special video here about well, movie idea slash series idea that I actually been kind of thinking of. So I've actually read this book a couple years back. It's called Anabasis by Xenophon, and here we start with yeah, there it is. Here we start with Xenophon, who's the author of this story, and essentially the translation of the story goes into the March of the 10,000. So I believe there's 14 books that he wrote, and some go into detail on what home life was like, and a lot of it was inspired by his teacher. I believe it was Socrates. But there's one particular story, which is March of the 10,000, that I'd love to see adapted into the big screen. Now, it was influence for one of the bigger stories that more people know about in the 80s, 70s, known as The Warriors by Sol Yuricks, which eventually led to the video or movie The Warriors. Now, the movie is very similar in the aspect of how Anabasis started out, but we won't get into the Warriors. It's very different, and the movie's a little more tamed down version compared to the book, The Warriors. But the actual source is Anabasis by Xenophon. Now, there's actually a page you can actually read the whole thing, and I'll put a link in the description so you can read it yourself. But we're going to start with the Anabasis of Xenophon. So the whole premise of it is there's a war between Cyrus the Younger and Prince Xerxes, or rather King Xerxes at that time, and he lives in Babylonia down right here. And so the beginning portion would start right here at Ephesus once all the Greek mercenaries are kind of contracted in. And these, mind you, these are all different clans of Greeks that kind of hate each other, but because they're being paid, they're willing to do it and they're willing to just work, do this job and then go back home and then come back to being whatever. So Cyrus the Younger hires a bunch of Greeks, and they go all this way, and it's actually a pretty quick route to get to Babylonia. In fact, I think it's like a week it takes them to get just halfway there to Babylon from Greece, and then I believe it's a couple more weeks as they plan and figure out how to deal with Xerxes, and they get to the Battle of Babylon, where Cyrus the Younger attempts to charge Xerxes head on and is actually killed. Um, Pretty quickly. Though the Greeks are able to win their part of the fight, the loyalists to Cyrus kind of run at that point, and the Greeks are kind of unaware of what's happening on their other flank while they're taking on everything else on their flank. So it essentially the Greeks win their side, but the flank that was kind of controlled by Cyrus, his loyalists of the Persian Empire, they ran. That flank collapsed, and instead of engaging with the Greeks, as they saw they were just getting wrecked on the other side, they went back to their camp and destroyed the camp. So the Greeks had nowhere really to go to for safety, and that was actually a smart call on their part because they were just throwing numbers at the Greeks and they were just being obliterated. So Xerxes played a more passive war, and I think this is where this would make for a good like maybe first 3 to 4 episodes. And I'd love to see a pretty good cast play the Greeks here. And essentially, this whole fight maybe take 1, 2 episodes itself, the battle itself and how it all kind of played out, and then the retreat, which the retreat would probably be the second half of the season, because you could split this into 2 seasons. So I'd say once you get into Armenia is when you'd see the change, and from there you kind of can slow it down, and then you get to pretty much went to where the Greeks try to head on home. Now the whole way they're fighting all this route, all of it. So Xerxes has his men, or rather Cyrus's ex-loyalist men, chase uh, Xenophon and the 10,000 Greeks all the way back. And he says, if you come back without any Greeks, you're pretty much dead. So essentially, if they wanted to live, they had to fight the Greeks every step of the way. And they were smart about it. They knew not to confront them head on because that's just where the Greeks would win. So they used ranged, and essentially it became like a ranged battle. The Greeks kept moving forward, and they had to hire a bunch of mercenaries, some slingers to help them out, and then they would slowly fight back. But they wouldn't necessarily turn to attack them. They would be at this constant retreat, and they were attacked every step of the way. Now they did have a few breaks here and there, but essentially the troops were super tired. They hated each other from the beginning because they're different clans, but all the leadership died over here when Xerxes tried to meet with them. So that was another factor, another episode. I guess the Red Wedding is the closest thing you could call to that from Game of Thrones. And so you could technically end it right where I want to say where the Greeks finally are past Armenia, past the mountains, and can see the water, and you can kind of see the retreat of them pretty much the whole way there. They're fighting, they're fighting to get out of there. Even though they technically won the initial battle, their camp was destroyed, and there was nothing for them to really return to. With Cyrus the younger dead, the amount of money that they were going to get paid was non-existent at that point. Anything that they had in contract was now out the window, and so they began their retreat. And you might recognize this famous drawing is when they finally see the water, because it takes them at least a month. I want to say a month to get to the sea. And when they see it, they're like, the sea, the sea. They're all happy and chanting about it. And we can end on a good note there for season one. And then from there, you can obviously read more on it. And we'd actually go back to here. And yeah, it'd be right around here. And then season two is another just another interesting arc in their adventure back home, because at this point they're out of money, they're out of supplies, they don't have anything. They fought the Armenians, they fought the Persians, and now they're fighting the Turks. And they get here and they're helping locals. So the locals are helping them with supplies and trying to just get out of there. So the way they are mercenarying themselves to these smaller, I guess, kingdoms, and they're fighting the enemies for them, and they're winning. But they're this whole time they're just losing men little by little, and they're just trying to make their way back home at this point. They're so tired. They've given up a lot, and they're just trying to make it home. And it's more political at this point, but essentially, yeah, they're still trying to get back, and they can't quite get there yet. And I believe it's right around here where they're actually able to finally get a ferry to take their wounded and their sick and their more older warriors pretty much ferried back, while the rest of them kept running, because they're still being attacked by other armies here. Not This is all smaller kingdoms at this point, and they're trying to play some very strategic diplomacy while trying to get back, because at this point there's nothing they can do. They have to either fight their way back or get help and try and resupply, because at this point there's not much to resupply, especially when they went through the mountains. There wasn't too much to supply, and especially when they're being constantly attacked. So I think this would make for a great second season. We started off right off where they're like at the sea, and almost immediately becomes apparent that they still have quite a ways to go back to Greece. And yeah, essentially you can see this. So this is the full expedition of the 10,000, the route they went until finally they get to safe ground. Now, technically, if they just get to western part of Turkey, um, it's essentially more allies there for them, where not necessarily that they're not going to be attacked. I think that's the best way to put it. Is it's safe ground, and that's kind of where they wanted to stay. I believe right here is where a bunch of the men split. But it's actually a great story, and you get to kind of learn a lot of the characters at the beginning. I think was the best part of it. And then slowly you just see Xenophon just he's not even like a general. He's just like a mid-level captain, and he's like the highest surviving commander out there, and he's just yeah, I think he's like in his late 20s at this point, and he's just yeah, he's having to lead these 10,000 men all the way back, and he does fairly well considering. And I'd actually see this as a great two season miniseries. Even if you just make it like 4 or 5 episodes each, make it like an hour and a half long, make special, and you could totally get away with it. And then you can make one full season, 10 episodes, and you could do the whole thing. But if you're just gonna do 30 minutes, I'd say yeah, 2 seasons for sure, maybe even 3. Because there's a lot to this. I mean, heck, even just the preparing, there are some skirmishes that happen in the beginning, like even before all this happens between Cyrus and Xerxes, that you could add in that aren't technically part of the 10,000, but it could add into the prelude of what the 10,000 march of the 10,000 ends up being. Yeah, that's exactly what I'd hope to see. It's one of the videos, one of the movies, sorry, or series that I'd like to see. You could also turn this into a trilogy, where you'd have everything pre-war up to about here, and then the second movie, after, during the Battle of Babylon. So you'd see this first half and the Battle of Babylon, and then the second movie, them finding out what happened and just running all the way into Armenia, away from Cyrus the Younger's ex-loyal men. And then from Armenia, you could totally just make a complete different movie, and that'd be a nice trilogy there. Almost like the Lord of the Rings. It's an epic journey and an adventure. But I don't think you need to make it that long. But honestly, I think the series, it'd be better as a series than a movie. But yeah, this is my new idea pitch that I'd like to see make it onto I don't know, Netflix, Amazon, HBO, one of those major streaming services. Could be pretty good quality, and I'd love to hear it in Greek with subtitles. I know a lot of people that aren't really keen to subtitles, but I really enjoy the more authentic voice because otherwise the dubs just don't seem right. Maybe you could add dubs for those who actually prefer it that way. It's just I don't know if I'd like to see it in English, like the 300 movie was. It's about the Battle of the 300 of Thermopylae, but it's in English, led by a Scottish Leonidas, Gerard Butler. I think I'd want a little more authentic. Maybe get some Greek actors in there. I don't know. What do you guys think? Well, let me know in the comments, and we'll go on to the next video. All right, guys. I'll catch you later. Lord of Guts out.